everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Paint and Chat. So if you're new to this series, this is a series in which I show you some footage of what I've been working on whilst I chat to you, voiceover style, both about what is happening on the screen, but also just to talk about creative topics, and kind of like art inspiration, motivation, and kind of philosophizing about creativity, that kind of thing. So you can either grab something to do yourself or just sit and watch and listen. The choice is up to you. So here I am starting a creative session. I just randomly opened my little Arteza square journal and started playing in it. I usually start creative sessions like this in a sort of warm-up way rather than with a specific thing that I am working on. I find that this really helps me to get going. It kind of helps me get into that feeling where I can then start doing work that comes more from my feelings. I always need a time to warm up, I guess, because it doesn't just flow out so easily. And this start of a creative session can usually be quite uncomfortable. It doesn't just, I don't come to it with loads of creative juice or inspiration. I don't know, does inspiration exist? I want to say yes, because I know that feeling of like, oh, I just want to get this down on paper, this feeling or this idea, but it doesn't happen very often to me. So that's actually something that I wanted to talk about, which is motivation and showing up for your art. And I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic. She says something about don't wait for inspiration. You got to turn up for your art and be there for it every day, like a job almost. Admittedly, I'm very bad at this. I go and do other things very much. I mean, obviously, I have a lot of an admin side to art, so running my Patreon, creating YouTube videos, that kind of stuff, and it does sometimes get in the way or become a little bit of an excuse to me for not actually going and doing the art. But the art has to be where it starts, right? If you want to express yourself, if you want to be creative through like a visual medium, you have to go and do that. You can't just talk about it. I mean, maybe you can, but it doesn't seem very honest. So you got to go and do it. And so you got to show up for it. And that made me think about art sessions and how difficult it can be. And then I was thinking about basically trying to find the path of least resistance. Because sometimes it's so hard to get into that mindset of feeling like you want to do art. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not like that for you, maybe it's easy for you, but it isn't easy for me. And so that's what I want to talk about, how it's not easy. And so the path of least resistance, and laziness. But laziness is kind of like, it's a kind of an ugly word, right? Like if you're called lazy, or if you have an internal voice that says, oh, you're lazy, that's not a positive thing. But if we flip it and if we think more about ease, where is the ease? How can you find that ease? And I think that's what I was talking about when I started off saying, I warm up and I just play in my journal, and, I go to a page where there's already something on it, so I don't feel so intimidated by the blank page. That's about, inviting in ease and doing stuff that isn't, well, it's basically the path of least resistance. And, I was thinking, I want to just talk about what I'm doing here, because I'm working in my big journal, and I got myself a really big, what do you call that? My mind's gone blank. I can only think of the Dutch word. Penseel. Brush. It's a brush. Oh my god, it was such an easy word. I got myself a really big brush, and like at the start of it, you could see I was holding it really at the end to stay loose. And this is actually one of my favorite ways recently of sketching something in. So I sketched something in with paint, like undiluted paint, or sometimes a little bit diluted, with this big brush, and kind of holding it really loosely. Although right now I'm holding it nearer to the front, which just gives you a bit more control. But I've really enjoyed doing this because it kind of keeps me loose, and keeps me not going in with lots and lots of detail straight away. Anyway, that was a little aside about what I was doing there. Oh yes, there was this thing about the path of least resistance and about like easing into art that made me think of that as an artist, you have to create your own space, which is actually really curious. Like, if you think about our society, if you want to learn something, you can go somewhere. You can go to the library. You can go to a class. You know, it's there for you. If you want to exercise, you can go to the gym or you can go outside. If you want to create your art, you need to create your own space for it. There is no existing space where you can create your own personal art. Like, you can't really go to the library of art. Like, that doesn't exist. So you have to get your own equipment. And I mean, school obviously has a little part to play in facilitating the accessibility of making art. But if you are just, you know, like your standard garden variety adult human, you will probably have to create that space yourself, rather than the spaces that are already there for other types of hobbies or other types of activities. And I think that's kind of curious, and I think it's a little bit of a barrier, especially if, you know, art as a kind of an emotional thing, rather than art as I think there is some art stuff that is more didactic, like it's more kind of results focused. Like if you're doing crocheting or you're gonna sew something, you're focused on the end result, and you also know the things that you will need in order to get to that end result. Or if you want to do like a puzzle, if you want to do diamond painting, that kind of stuff, like there's a specific thing that you need in order to go and do that. Whereas when it comes to that kind of art making that comes from within and that doesn't have a goal attached to it, you're basically creating something out of like quote unquote nothing. The spaces, the kind of the mental space for that is a very different thing. Because I do some of the other type of art and craft as well. Like I do, I make some earrings, and I do like a what do you call it? Like I do a blackwork sampler, which is like kind of like cross stitch, except it's just with a running stitch, and you do different designs and stuff. And it's a lot more like sitting down to just, I don't know, to do something more methodical. I imagine it's similar to like doing coloring in pages as well. Like it's kind of a mindful time, but you're not confronted with the kind of the creation process of not knowing what's gonna come next, which I think is hugely difficult. And I think that is one of those things that really holds us back. Like, you know, in groups and stuff that I'm in on the internet, it's often people who talk or beginners talk about, or, you know, even people who are not beginners talk about, you know, what are you gonna do? I've got loads of supplies, I've got time, but then when I sit down, nothing happens, or I don't like what I create. And, you know, I think that's part of that emotional aspect of art creation, and I think it's very interesting. So another thing that I was thinking about recently was the process of art making sometimes not feeling great. And I already touched upon it when I was talking about my warm-up process, and about how sometimes when I sit down, like I decide to make art, but I don't necessarily feel buoyed up or super positive or whatever. And then sometimes even the process itself sometimes I really get into it and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm on fire, it's great. But then other times it is just really difficult. And I did a small series of work recently where you might have seen them on my Instagram. They have like quite raw faces and figures with a very kind of bright orange background. And so I love the way that those pieces look. Like, oh, love them. I'm so glad that I was able to create those. But the process, it felt rubbish. It just felt like basically. I'm gonna bleep that out, but it did. You can imagine what word I said. And I was kind of feeling disappointed with myself. Like, why am I doing this thing that I am kind of dedicating my life and my business to, and I'm feeling bad? Like, does that make me bad? I don't know. But then I was also thinking about that afterwards, that if you want to create art from your feelings and you want to stay with your feelings through the art creation, through your art practice, then there are going to be times when it feels like crap. Because when you're sitting down and you're feeling happy and joyful, that's going to come out into your work. But when you are sitting down and you're not feeling like that, or you are sitting down in a kind of a more neutral way, but then when you do your art creation, it is bringing up difficult feelings. Because I don't know about you, but like the art that I create is a definite kind of line to my subconscious, and I am not necessarily a consciously emotional person where I'm in touch with all the feelings that are going on inside me. It's actually through art that it's able to come out in a kind of like in a more subconscious way. So if I am using my art in such a way, it's kind of a no-brainer that sometimes, or quite often actually, and I mean, you've seen my art, that it would feel pretty crappy actually. And that doesn't mean that I'm doing it wrong. And if like it's like that for you, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. I thought that was quite a interesting kind of awareness that I came to. Actually the whole thinking around this was sparked by watching by seeing a Awkward Yeti comic. I don't know if you know Awkward Yeti is like a person who does comics, and the two main characters in the comic are heart and brain. And so all these comics are centered around the difference between what's brain personified as a character, who obviously looks like a brain but with eyes and legs and hands, what they say, and then what heart says, and then their interactions together. And so there was this recent Awkward Yeti comic that had Heart, kind of, who is kind of happy-go-lucky, and Heart goes to Brain and says, anything less than perpetual joy is a failure on your part, kind of saying that to Brain. And I just thought that was hilarious, because that is obviously how I treat myself. I'm like, anything less than perpetual joy is a failure. Like, why can I not be perpetually joyful? Because if I was like that, then I would know that I'd be really good. And that is like the holy grail, and that's what we're all working towards, right? To be perpetually happy and joyful. And anything that isn't that means that I haven't reached enlightenment yet, and I am not there yet. And it's just, it's bullshit, obviously. But it is something that I do to myself. It's kind of this somehow this narrative of that happiness is something that is going to come, and then it's going to stay, and then that means that you've made it. Instead, I think, when I start thinking about it, and I start thinking about what I want for myself, I guess, and my art and my expression and what I want that to be, is like, I don't want to sit inside the sucky, horrible feelings, but I also so much acknowledge and understand that they're part of life. And like, why would I want to I don't know, avoid them? I mean, I understand why I want to avoid them, because they feel bad, but like, I also I don't know, I want to have a full range of emotions and feelings, and I want my art to help me with that. And so in a way, I guess if I turn it around that way, or if I continue that line of thinking, then it's actually a gift to be able to sit with my art and my art process and to feel badly, because it's allowing me to experience those feelings rather than have to put them away. But whilst it's going on, it is, it's massively difficult. It's not fun. But it is, I guess, part of my goal of what my art is supposed to do for me, like what I want my art to do for me. So yeah, I mean, I hope you don't find this too heavy and stuff. It's just, these are the things that I think about, and these are the things that go around in my head, and that the thoughts that kind of come up and that I ponder and that I like to explore. I love thinking. If you like following me and my kind of ramblings, then hopefully you like thinking too. So yeah, so basically I guess the conclusion of all of that is that if it feels bad, I guess you need to figure out for yourself, does it feel bad because you're doing something that just doesn't fit with you, or that is wrong and that you might want to change? Or does it feel bad because you are there with your feelings and you are feeling something that, needs to be felt, and that has come up out of a genuine expression of your feelings and through art? It's a good thing to become aware of, and to, I don't know, see what fits, I guess. I am in the video right now, you see me working with these woodies, the Stabilo woodies, which I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with. I've kind of slowly bought most of the colors. I've all bought them one by one. And I love that they are so bright, and I love that they kind of apply in a very kind of toddler crayon-y way. And they are very kind of creamy and smooth. I like them a bit better than the Neo Color 2s. I hardly ever use those anymore. I think I've given them all to my kids because I don't use them. But these woodies, I do like. They're very robust. Like I've my Neo Color 2s, I was often like breaking them and stuff. Whereas these, you can really hold them in your fist and scribble and scratch with them and stuff, which is it's very satisfying. But yeah, like I said, a bit of a love-hate relationship because of the way that they are water-soluble. And when something is water-soluble and you are not activating it, it can sometimes kind of lie on top of what you're doing, kind of in a similar way as an actual oil-based crayon would. So I'm still kind of figuring out what I like or dislike about that, but I am planning maybe a couple of videos about woodies. Here you've seen me, I've moved on to my black journal, which I've promptly covered with light colored paint, but you still see the black coming out at the edges of the page. And I'm really enjoying kind of experimenting with the black background and seeing what happens on there when you're adding kind of neutrals or colors. And in this on this page, I started doing a lot with those woodies, which seems to be something that I like doing in this particular journal. It seems to be that because of the contrast of having the bright colors on top of the black, I keep grabbing for those and kind of like just scratching. But what you see me do now is a little bit of acrylic gouache, and then with my new favorite tool, which I got off of Amazon for, I don't know, ridiculously not very much money. It was like probably like £3 or something. It's just like one of those hardware tools. So it's kind of like a palette knife, but it's much more rigid, and it's just really interesting to scrape and smudge paint with that. Credit for that actually has to go to Amanda. I'll put a link in the description. I follow her on Instagram, and she's got all these fun videos. She does lots of like rainbow art, although the rainbows aren't necessarily rainbow colored. It's like rainbow shapes, and it's very inspiring to me. And she uses that tool, or a tool like it, to apply her paint, and it just looks very satisfying. And I was like, oh, I must have one of those. So I really I enjoy the different application of paint that gives, both in terms of what it looks like when you apply it, and also what it feels like physically to use that tool. And that's something that I'm kind of always on the lookout for, because although I use brushes a little bit, I'm actually often trying to find different tools to manipulate the paint. So manipulate and apply the paint. So I will like using palette knives. I like using key cards. I like using this new tool, which I don't know. It's like a paint scraper tool. I don't even know what the official name is. And I'll put a link in the description. And what else? Princeton Catalyst tools. They're like those silicone, they're kind of like those kitchen things, except in this case they're made specifically for art. But yeah, they're very nice. So all of those things, and it's kind of curious, because you might actually say like, Iris, why don't you use your fingers? Because they are free. You don't have to buy them. But I don't actually like using my fingers. I've tried. It's just not really my thing. But maybe I'll try again. Maybe I need to invest in some good rubber gloves, and then I can kind of get beyond the kind of the emotional obstacle of like, oh, I don't want to get cadmium and cobalt pigments on my fingers, because that's, those things are not good for you. Yeah, so we're kind of getting towards the end of this art session. So this was interesting, what I was working on right now, because that is like a kind of a more male looking face, although that eye on the right looks more feminine as well. And like there was really no specific goal that I was working towards. Like once I get into the kind of the face work that you see me do after like a warm up, and then I kind of get into that real face art journaling, which is my style and my go-to, and allows me to express those things that I want to express. Once I get into that, it kind of just stuff happens by itself, and I don't really think too much about it, which is why my style is so messy and random. And there isn't really, when I do teaching, I break it down into steps, and I could break, this whole video, I could break it down into steps, saying like, okay, first I did this, then I did this, then I did this, but it's not a step-by-step that I'm following. It's just, I'm just following whatever is inside me that goes, oh, I'm gonna grab this color now, or I'm gonna add an eye now, or whatever. And sometimes it's just kind of motifs that or motifs or techniques or kind of habits that I have formed over time, and I'm just kind of repeating something that I have done before, that I'm kind of grasping or grabbing both on my art table and in my brain, the things that are familiar, and then occasionally I will grab for things that are unfamiliar or that are new. It doesn't happen all the time, and I definitely don't think that I can kind of force that. It just happens. And then, I guess just have to do it a lot. Oh, let me just talk about the applicator bottle. I always talk about the applicator bottle, but it's so good. It's, white, thin lines, always with the paint flowing, doesn't get clogged like any paint pen that I have. I always ruin my paint pens. So the applicator bottle with white fluid acrylics, I use golden, but you could use any, and a little bit of airbrush medium to help it flow. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this little paint and chat. Please give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment, to let me know what you're working on. Let me know how you like to apply paint, whether that's brushes or other tools, or, you know, surprise me. Do you use your kids' Lego to apply paint? I don't know. I'd love to hear from you. If you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel. I upload videos occasionally and studio vlogs. And if you enjoy my content, please check out my Patreon, where I put more content and videos and stickers and other fun things. Thank you very much for watching. Bye!